public utility regulators have reconsidered and now want to review the proposed merger between Hartford-based Northeast Utilities and Boston's NSTAR. It is a decision that could jeopardize the deal to create a $17.5 billion utility company. When the merger was first announced in 2010, PURA said it didn't have jurisdiction because the move would not create a new holding company. The merger agreement between the two utilities expires on April 16th and already faces ongoing review in Massachusetts. Now, some have been pushing Connecticut regulators to do exactly this, to change their minds and review the deal. Among them, Rob Cox, who is a Connecticut native and a U.S. editor for Reuters, who has written a series of articles examining the joining of the two power companies. We spoke with him a few weeks ago about the deal and why he feels so strongly that Connecticut regulators needed to get involved. His points are perhaps even more relevant with this latest development.
If you thought Connecticut Light and Power was not accountable when it was dealing with Irene and after Halloween, it's not going to get any more accountable now that its CEO is going to be based in Boston.
Reuters financial journalist Rob Cox says the NU-NSTAR merger is one of the longest delayed mergers he's ever seen, indicating to him that Massachusetts regulators are taking time to review the pros and cons. His issue is that Connecticut regulators have waived their rights to review the move, even though the benefits to Connecticut are unclear. If
you look at the regulatory documents that CL&P, or Northeast Utilities, has filed in the case, they've said that there'll be something like $750 million of cumulative cost savings over the next 10 years. 40% of those will accrue to ratepayers in Massachusetts. It's kind of interesting in just the omission of anything about Connecticut. I mean, it doesn't tell you what Connecticut's going to get, and you assume that a lot of that's going to go to shareholders. So I would say, actually, the barn, is the horse is bolted on this one. Connecticut customers should be worried about whose interests will be guarded if Massachusetts regulators are in charge, and that while Connecticut regulators have recently said they'd like to take a role in reviewing the fusing of the two companies, Cox says it might be too late. Now, as far as the PURA, look, they've waived their rights. It's going to take something more than that. It's going to take something like special legislation, which, by the way, the governor's office has told me, and I've written about, that they were considering. I don't know what's happened to that, but they have basically left it to the Massachusetts public utility regulators to make the decision. But they are really only, they only should care about Massachusetts ratepayers. As a captive customer base for utilities that are regional monopolies, regulators should be the first and last line of defense for ratepayers. In Connecticut, Cox says regulators have been failing to thoroughly review this merger and failing to manage CL&P up to this point. I mean, it's not that different, if you will, think about the financial crisis, what happened with the banking industry. We had a complete failure of the SEC, Federal Reserve, all the other banking regulatory authorities to keep an eye on the investment banks, to keep an eye on the Citigroups and the Bank of Americas of the world, and we almost went into an absolute financial apocalypse. As a result of that, what happened? Well, we passed the Dodd-Frank Act in Washington, which is a complete reform of the regulatory apparatus. I think something like that is going to have to happen in Connecticut. It remains to be seen what the future of power will look like in the state. Unfortunately, it seems for the time being, Connecticut customers are powerless. The only basis on which we can judge whether they're doing a good job with their monopoly is whether or not our rates go down or up. And I'm afraid it's the writing is very clearly on the wall that our rates are going to go up. Now, you tell me how that can happen when you've created efficiencies. The only way is you've handed those efficiencies off to the market. Now, I'm a red-blooded capitalist, don't get me wrong, but this isn't capitalism. This is monopoly capitalism. It's a completely different kettle of fish. Our thanks to Rob Cox, who was kind enough to do that interview for us from New York. We will have him on again soon. Thanks so much for watching this week's edition of The Real Story. We'll see you here again next week. Don't forget, if you missed something on The Real Story, you can now watch it online by going to ctnow.com. You can also catch us on YouTube. And please follow me on Twitter @Lori Paris. Thanks a lot.